There were two members of this insignificant party who deserve mention at this point. Both were to prove important in the rise of Hitler. Captain Ernst Röhm, on the staff of the Army's District Command 7 in Munich, had joined the party before Hitler. He was a stocky, bull-necked, piggish-eyed, scar-faced professional soldier. The upper part of his nose had been shot away in 1914, with a flair for politics and a natural ability as an organizer. Like Hitler, he was possessed of a burning hatred for the Democratic Republic and the November criminals he held responsible for it. His aim was to recreate a strong nationalist Germany, and he believed with Hitler that this could be done only by a party based on the lower classes, from which he himself, unlike most regular army officers, had come. A tough, ruthless, driving man, albeit like so many of the early Nazis, a homosexual, he helped to organize the first Nazi strong-arm squads which grew into the SA, the army of stormtroopers which he commanded until his execution by Hitler in 1934. Röhm not only brought into the budding party large numbers of ex-servicemen and Free Corps volunteers, who formed the backbone of the organization in its early years, but as an officer of the army, which controlled Bavaria, he obtained for Hitler and his movement the protection and sometimes the support of the authorities. Without this help, Hitler probably could never have got a real start in his campaign to incite the people to overthrow the Republic. Certainly he could not have got away with his methods of terror and intimidation without the tolerance of the Bavarian government and police. Dietrich Eckart, 21 years older than Hitler, was often called the spiritual founder of National Socialism. A witty journalist, a mediocre poet and dramatist, he had translated Ibsen's Peer Gynt and written a number of unproduced plays. In Berlin, for a time, he had led, like Hitler in Vienna, the bohemian vagrant's life, become a drunkard, taken to morphine, and, according to Haydn, been confined to a mental institution where he was finally able to stage his dramas using the inmates as actors. He had returned to his native Bavaria at the war's end and held forth before a circle of admirers at the Brennnessel wine cellar in Schwabling, the artists' quarter in Munich, preaching Aryan superiority and calling for the elimination of the Jews and the downfall of the swine in Berlin. "We need a fellow at the head." Haydn, who was a working newspaperman in Munich at the time, quotes Eckart as declaiming to the habitués of the Brennnessel wine cellar in 1919. "Who can stand the sound of a machine gun? The rabble need to get fear into their pants. We can't use an officer because the people don't respect them anymore. The best would be a worker who knows how to talk. He doesn't need much brains. He must be a bachelor, then we'll get the women." What more natural than that the hard-drinking poet, Eckart died of overdrinking in December 1923, should find in Adolf Hitler the very man he was looking for? He became a close advisor to the rising young man in the German Workers' Party, lending him books, helping to improve his German, both written and spoken, and introducing him to his wide circle of friends, which included not only certain wealthy persons who were induced to contribute to the party's funds and Hitler's living, but such future aides as Rudolf Hess and Alfred Rosenberg. Hitler's admiration for Eckart never flagged, and the last sentence of Mein Kampf is an expression of gratitude to this erratic mentor. "He was," says Hitler in concluding his book, "one of the best who devoted his life to the awakening of our people, in his writings and his thoughts, and finally in his deeds." Such was the weird assortment of misfits who founded National Socialism, who unknowingly began to shape a movement which in 13 years would sweep the country, the strongest in Europe, and bring to Germany its Third Reich. The confused locksmith Drexler provided the kernel, the drunken poet Eckart some of the spiritual foundation, the economic crank Feder what passed as an ideology, the homosexual Röhm the support of the army and the war veterans. But it was now the former tramp, Adolf Hitler, not quite 31 and utterly unknown, who took the lead in building up what had been no more than a backroom debating society into what would soon become a formidable political party. All the ideas which had been bubbling in his mind since the lonesome days of hunger in Vienna now found an outlet, and an inner energy which had not been observable in his make-up burst forth. He prodded his timid committee into organizing bigger meetings. He personally typed out and distributed invitations. Later he recalled how once, after he had distributed 80 of these, we sat waiting for the masses who were expected to appear. An hour late, the chairman had to open the meeting. We were again 7. The old 7. But he was not to be discouraged. He increased the number of invitations by having them mimeographed. He collected a few marks to insert a notice of a meeting in a local newspaper. The success, he says, was positively amazing. 111 people were present. Hitler was to make his first public speech following the main address by a Munich professor. Harrer, nominal head of the party, objected. This gentleman, who was certainly otherwise honest, Hitler relates, just happened to be convinced that I might be capable of doing certain things, but not of speaking. I spoke for 30 minutes, and what before I had simply felt within me, without in any way knowing it, was now proved by reality. I could speak. Hitler claims the audience was electrified by his oratory, and its enthusiasm proved by donations of 300 marks, which temporarily relieved the party of its financial worries. At the start of 1920, Hitler took over the party's propaganda, an activity to which he had given much thought since he had observed its importance in the socialist and Christian social parties in Vienna. He began immediately to organize by far the biggest meeting ever dreamt of by the pitifully small party. It was to be held on February 24, 1920, in the Festsaal of the famous Hofbräuhaus, with a seating capacity of nearly 2,000. Hitler's fellow committeemen thought he was crazy. Harrer resigned in protest and was replaced by Drexler, who remained skeptical. Harrer also was opposed to Hitler's violent anti-Semitism and believed that Hitler was alienating the working-class masses. These were the real reasons why he resigned. Hitler emphasizes that he personally conducted the preparations. Indeed, the event loomed so large for him that he concludes the first volume of Mein Kampf with a description of it, because, he explains, it was the occasion when the party burst the narrow bonds of a small club and for the first time exerted a determining influence on the mightiest factor of our time, public opinion. Hitler was not even scheduled as the main speaker. This role was reserved for a certain Dr. Johannes Dingfelder, a homeopathic physician, a crackpot who contributed articles on economics to the newspapers under the pseudonym of Germanus Agricola, and who was soon to be forgotten. His speech was greeted with silence. Then Hitler began to speak. As he describes the scene, there was a hail of shouts, there were violent clashes in the hall, a handful of the most faithful war comrades and other supporters battled with the disturbers, communists and socialists, and only little by little were able to restore order. I was able to go on speaking. After half an hour, the applause slowly began to drown out the screaming and shouting. When, after nearly 4 hours, the hall began to empty, I knew that now the principles of the movement which could no longer be forgotten were moving out among the German people. In the course of his speech, Hitler had enunciated for the first time the 25 points of the program of the German Workers' Party. They had been hastily drawn up by Drexler, Feder, and Hitler. Most of the heckling at Hitler had really been directed against parts of the program which he read out. But he nevertheless considered all the points as having been adopted, and they became the official program of the Nazi Party when its name was altered on April 1, 1920, to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Indeed, for tactical reasons, Hitler in 1926 declared them unalterable. They are certainly a hodgepodge, a catch-all for the workers, the lower middle class, and the peasants, and most of them were forgotten by the time the party came to power. A good many writers on Germany have ridiculed them, and the Nazi leader himself was later to be embarrassed when reminded of some of them. Yet, as in the case of the main principles laid down in Mein Kampf, the most important of them were carried out by the Third Reich, with consequences disastrous to millions of people inside and outside of Germany. The very first point in the program demanded the union of all Germans in a greater Germany. Was this not exactly what Chancellor Hitler would insist on and get when he annexed Austria and its 6 million Germans? When he took the Sudetenland with its 3 million Germans? And was it not his demand for the return of German Danzig and the other areas in Poland inhabited predominantly by Germans which led to the German attack on Poland? and brought on World War II? And cannot it be added that it was one of the world's misfortunes that so many in the interwar years either ignored or laughed off the Nazi aims which Hitler had taken the pains to put down in writing?